Hi, my name is Richard Paz, and today I will be presenting on the company Starlink. And I will specifically focus on their increased risk as a company during the Ukraine and Russian conflict. Let's begin. So here's an overview of the slides that I'll be presenting. We'll cover each topic as I get to each slide. So first and foremost, Starlink is a high-speed internet service provider, or an ISP, also known as. It's gained a lot of popularity since its um, beginning as a company in 2019. It's heading to be the top 10 or one of the top 10 in the US internet service providers. Its services provide low latency, high responsiveness, and high availability. One thing that stands out about them is that they provide these services in not just metropolitan areas where traditional ISPs function, but in rural areas where there's not a lot of internet connectivity. It's also worth noting that Starlink is a subset of SpaceX, an aerospace manufacturer owned by Elon Musk. I note that just because this is a big enabler for Starlink being able to manufacture not only the ground internet services, but also the satellites that go into orbit and also deploying those through your own aerospace manufacturer. It's kind of all in-house, if you will. Now, the risks identified were circled around Starlink's support on the Ukraine-Russian conflict in 2022. It caught the eyes of Russia and specifically their cyber forces, now aiming to disable Starlink's capabilities. In addition, it also hurt Starlink's reputation with U.S. political figures and also with the U.S. community in general. Just the abruptness and the involvement. There was a lot of opinions and political conflict between supporting Ukraine and the Russian conflict. What level of involvement we were going to be in as citizens and also as a country. So the summary of risk analysis, so there's two key risks that I identified is the first one being a denial of service attack for the Starlink satellites. This is something that happened just 24 hours before the physical invasion of Ukraine. Viasat was Ukraine's broadband internet service provider, and Russian cyber forces took down that service through means of a denial of service attack. So that set up Starlink to be hit with the same attack, if not a more aggressive and elaborate attack, just because it came in and provided the service that they intentionally brought down. So risk scenario number two is a critical vulnerability update to all Starlink IPs. Elon Musk sent over 42,000 Starlink terminals to support Ukraine, and all of those need a critical patch that masks their geolocation from wireless packet sniffers or wireless sniffers that will reveal each Starlink's geolocation. So that is the predicament in terms of risk analysis. Now, analyzing these risk scenarios using the FAIR ontology. So for scenario one being the denial of service attack, the threat event frequency is estimated to be 21,000 per year. Starlink's vulnerability will be estimated at 60% for this scenario. And in the event of a massive denial of service campaign that brings down all Starlinks in Ukraine, the primary loss would be between 1 million and 3 million, with an average loss of about 2 million. For the critical vulnerability, it's estimated at 1 to 5 times per year, depending on how many patches are going to be published. The vulnerability would be estimated at 80% for the scenario. And in the event of a massive geolocation exploit campaign that identifies thousands of Starlinks in Ukraine, the primary loss would be between 500,000 and 1 million, with an average loss of $750,000. Moving on. So I want to draw your attention to the fair risk tool outputs on the right-hand side, the graphs. So you'll see on top is the pre-mitigation. That's our current state where we stand in terms of risk. The bottom graph shows if the proposed controls and mitigating factors are implemented, that's the reduction in risk that you'll see. And as you can tell from the graphs, it's a significant one that we should definitely consider. So for the denial of service, we would implement traffic filtering for known connections. So basically, refining our access control list to allow specific dedicated IPs and also block everything else. And then also implementing rate limits on data traversing into the satellite, making sure that we have a control on how much can be sent into our Starlink satellites. And lastly, apply failover system. When one Starlink satellite fails, another one should kick on and take over. For critical vulnerability updates, essentially deploy the patches. It's not centrally managed. That's one of the biggest challenges. So a way around that is to create an awareness campaign and create a how-to guide and deploy that individually to site by site, commander by commander, explaining the urgency and importance of this patch, and then also making sure to see it all the way through for their technical teams. Now, some key metrics for monitoring would be vulnerability monitoring to see if the patches are taking and if they are effective over the year-long time period. Same thing for denial of service. Did the filtering, the data limiting work? Are there less attacks coming in through your SIEM tool that you can identify? In summary, the effectiveness of these assessments can be seen here. The effectiveness of the mitigations reduce vulnerabilities 30% for the denial of service situation. It also reduces the primary loss from 500,000 between 500,000 and 1.5 million, with an average loss of 1 million. For scenario two, there's a reduction in 40% for vulnerability risk, and also you'll see the primary loss has also changed in their range and average loss. So in summary, this is our current state where we stand amidst the Ukraine and Russian conflict and being Starlink in that conflict, the proposed mitigating factors, and then the outputs that and the benefits essentially that we will gain from putting those remediations in place. Well, with that said, this concludes my presentation.